Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Welcome back to a weekend reading report, a wasted weekend reading report edition of Grammaticus Books. So, the Wasted Weekend was a reading event that was created by CriminOlly over on his great channel, and I'll link his video down below, where you pick a trashy novel and then take the Valentine's Day, I almost call it the Vikings Day, the Valentine's Day weekend to read your trashy novel and see if you wasted the weekend or if it wasn't a wasted weekend with your trashy novel. Now, by trashy novel, we don't necessarily mean a bad novel. The definition of a trashy novel is a novel that you might not necessarily want your neighbors to know that you like to read. So what I did is I pulled down all my Lin Carter books, which are excellent for trashy novels, and I went through and I picked The Nemesis of Evil by Lin Carter, 1975, the first of his Prince Zarkon crime-fighting crew novels that he did. There were a total of 5 of these that went to, I think 1987 was the last of them. And I had high hopes for this book when I picked it out, because I actually like Lin Carter. The last story that I read by Lin Carter was The Black Star, which is a sort of a fantasy/science fiction novel. And this was really good. I enjoyed this book quite a bit. This was a very well-written fantasy novel by Lin Carter. A bit pastiche, but it was good. So I really had high hopes for Prince Zarkon and his Omega crew here in The Nemesis of Evil. And they were dashed pretty rapidly. My hopes were crushed after about page 10. This is, I can't lie, this is a bad novel. It's not bad. This is a horrible, horrible book. It is one of the most lazily written books that I've read in recent memory. So the blurb on the front of it reads, "More action than Doc Savage, more adventure than the Avenger, introducing Zarkon, Lord of the Unknown, and his Omega crew." So Zarkon is a superhuman who has come back from the future, and I'm sorry, there will be some spoilers here, so just be warned. I know I just dropped one of them on you, but going forward there'll be more spoilers. He's a person who's been sent back from the future in order to fight mega criminals, super criminals in the 20th century who destroy the future. So that's the premise of the Prince Zarkon novels. And then he's assisted by his Omega crew. And it is basically, it's an homage to Doc Savage and the Avenger. But it is, the characters in this novel are absolutely cardboard cutout caricatures. They're flatter than flat. They are caricatures of stereotypes, ethnic stereotypes. And the plot is basically non-existent. And the writing is horrible. The writing is horrendous. It is the most lazily written book that I've read in recent memory. So it is Prince Zarkon who has come back and he's organized his Omega crew, which is 5 individuals who help him combat crime. And he's a super crime fighter. That is the general plot of the book. And Zarkon is known by numerous names. Lin Carter gives him numerous names throughout this novel here. It's like he couldn't decide what he wanted to call his main superhero of this series. So he's known as Prince Zarkon, he's known as the Master, he's known as the Lord of the Unknown. He refers to him as the Man from Tomorrow, the Nemesis of Evil, the Master of Fate, Z1000, and my personal favorite, the Ultimate Man, which just brings to mind to me, all I can think of is Hulk Hogan from Rocky II, the Ultimate Male. So those are all names that he gives to Prince Zarkon in this book. It's like he couldn't decide what he wanted to name him, or he would just create a new name about every 15 to 20 pages and stick it in there. And they're going after a master criminal who is known ultimately as the Master, which gets confusing a little bit, since Zarkon is also known as the Master. And he's also known as Lucifer, and he's also known as Sinistro. And apparently they thought this guy was dead. They run into him, they're like, "I'm looking into the face of a dead man," but then they never explain anything as how it's related to Sinistro's past. In fact, this book has no plot to it at all. It has no plot, none whatsoever. The only plot, so much as it exists in the book, is a newspaper reporter, an undercover newspaper reporter who has infiltrated Sinistro's cult that is located around Mount Shasta out on the West Coast, is murdered by Sinistro. And Zarkon and his Omega men get called in order to investigate the murder by the newspaper magnate who owns the newspaper where this reporter was working. And you get into it, and they're talking, they finally discover that Sinistro is behind this cult. And they're like, well, Sinistro's doing it. It must be more than just in trying to intimidate newspaper publishers, because in addition to murdering this guy, they're sending threatening letters and blackmail letters to other editors and publishers of newspapers to try to get good press for their cult. And they go, well, it must be a bigger plot. It must have something to do with overthrowing the United States or taking over the world. But then they never go into it. They never, further than that one line, that one sentence, and maybe two sentences in the book, they never explore that at all. All it is just them investigating this one murder tied to this newspaper, and it never goes any further. You never find out what Sinistro's up to. It just sits there. And the Omega Men they're these flat cardboard cutout characters. You've got one guy, his name is Nick Naldini, which sounds suspiciously like Harry Houdini, who is a retired stage magician, and he's an escape artist and sleight of hand expert, but he never uses any of those skills in the book. His only purpose is there is to create arguments with the other Omega Man by the name of Murphy Muldoon. And Murphy Muldoon is a short, red-haired Irishman with a fiery temper who likes to get into fistfights. You can't make this stuff up. And that's all he does in the book. And then you have Ace Harrigan, who's a steely-eyed fighter pilot whose job it is to fly their various aircraft from point A to point B. And it's just god-awful. Sinistro, the main villain, has a number of underlings who work for him. He has two large Nubian bodyguards whose names are Mongo and Simba. And then he has another underling, an obsequious Chinese man who wears Coke bottle glasses and whose name is Ching. And again, you can't make this stuff up. It's a truly horrible book. But anyway, I did finish it. So I read it. I took the bullet on this one so that you guys wouldn't have to. If you see this wonderful Don Mates cover, and it is a wonderful Don Mates cover, buy it for the cover. It's a great cover. It's the best thing about this book, though, because everything between this wraparound cover is absolute trash, and trash in the worst sense of the word. So that was the Nemesis of Evil. I did read another trashy book over the weekend, and that book was the Coelura, I just call it the Cholera by Anne McCaffery. My middle daughter challenged me to read this book and pulled it off the shelf and picked it up for me. It is what it is. I'm not the target audience of this book. This is a young adult coming of age science fiction novel that's aimed squarely at teenage girls. And for what it is, I'll say this: it is written far better. The writing is so much better than this lazy writing in Nemesis of Evil by Lin Carter. Anne McCaffery does know how to put together a sentence and a paragraph and to put together a plot, but it's essentially the Princess and the Frog in space. And then the main character, Kaisa, then gets the world's most lovely evening gown, who she then shows off and makes all the other women in the novel jealous. It's just basically a string of young coming-of-age teenage girl tropes all jammed into a small novel. It does have a ton of artwork, interior artwork by Ned Dameron. There's over 60 interior pages of artwork, which is actually pretty decent. There's some good artwork in here. And like I said, this book, it's written very well. It's just, it is what it is. It's a young adult science fiction novel aimed squarely at young teenage girls. And kind of shockingly, when I was reading that novel, I did finish it. It is very risque in parts. It was quite risque in parts. I was very surprised how promiscuous and how risque this book was in certain chapters of it. But that was the Cholera. I did finish it. So after these two stinkers, The Nemesis of Evil and Cholera by Anne McCaffery, I absolutely needed a palate cleanser. So I went in, and out of desperation, I went to Bloodstone by Karl Edward Wagner. What a breath of fresh air. This is just, the writing in this book is spectacular. I probably read this back in the 1990s, and this is my first time rereading it since then. And oh my gosh, Karl Edward Wagner is such a great author. He can write sentences and paragraphs and put together a scene better than almost anyone since Robert E. Howard. This is just a breath of fresh carsultual air tinged with a hint of blood and necromancy, and I'm loving it. I'm on page 75, and it's been fantastic. And I'll go through and devour that book up here in short order. But that's it. That is my wasted weekend reading report. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Other than that, I'm going to say take care, be safe, and I'll catch you guys in the future.